Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to this conversation with Hartford Decides on participatory budgeting, your voice in how public money is spent. I'm Valeriano Ramos with Everyday Democracy, and I'm also the coordinator of the Connecticut Civic Health Project, which is co-sponsoring this event. This event is part of the Connecticut Civic Ambassadors Program, and I am pleased to welcome the Civic Ambassadors with us here today. And we have Tere here, who is Civic Ambassador, and Richard as well. Welcome. This will be a very informal conversation on a participatory process that engages community members and their public officials in shared decision making on the allocation of some public funds. It is a process called participatory budgeting. I am pleased to introduce three of our leaders, of the leaders and members of Hartford Decides: Richard Frieder, Linda Bear, and Christine Caruso, who will talk about participatory budgeting in Hartford. So let me begin by introducing my friend Richard Frieder. Richard runs his own consulting practice, Community Capacity Builders. How long have you been running?
About 2 years.
2 years now. Very successful, right?
Thank you, Val. Keep saying that.
Absolutely. But he's also, he was the director of community engagement here at the Hartford Public Library for many years, and he's now also a senior associate of Everyday Democracy. He is founding member of the Connecticut Civic Health Advisory Group. When we started the advisory group in 2010, Richard was one of our 50 people who were part of the advisory group, so he's a founding member. We're proud to have him there and continues to serve on the advisory group. He's also a Connecticut Civic Ambassador, as I said earlier, and Richard serves on Hartford Decides steering committee. He's also a member of Hartford Votes, Hartford Vote Coalition. Please welcome Richard. Thank you. Thanks for being there. Linda Bayer is a founding member of the Hartford Decides steering committee as well, and currently serves as its secretary. She does consulting work in nonprofits and community organizations. She was previously employed as assistant city manager for the city of Hartford, and currently works part-time for the mayor of Hartford. She also serves on the leadership team of Hartford Votes, Vote Coalition. Welcome. Dr. Christine Caruso is visiting assistant professor at the School of Health and Natural Science at the University of St. Joseph in East Hartford. She received her PhD in environmental psychology from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. Prior to joining the University of St. Joseph, she was a research fellow at School Food Focus based in New York City. She's a member of Hartford Decide Steering Committee and has served on the evaluation committee for participatory budgeting in New York City, which is the PB process in the city of New York. Please welcome Christine. So thank you all of you for joining us today here in this conversation. It's a very informal conversation, so we'll just talk and enjoy the chat. Let me start with you, Christine. What is participatory budgeting? Its origins, its basic practice, and what are some current examples of it in the United States?
Sure, and I hope that my colleagues join in. So participatory budgeting originated in Porto Alegre, Brazil in 1989, and it really grew out of the problematic structural issues that city was struggling with, widespread failures across the infrastructure, power grid, and a real struggle to figure out where to start with trying to solve some of these problems since the need was so great. And looking to the community to address some of those issues. Since then, it has spread all around the world in over 1,500 cities. It came to the U.S. in, I believe, 2009, if I recall correctly, in Chicago, and then shortly thereafter in California and New York, and is in a number of cities here in the U.S. as well.
And I had the opportunity of meeting Josh Lerman at one of the NCDB conferences and also Frontiers of Democracy, and he's everywhere
Yes.
talking about PB. And the more people that hear about it, the more get engaged and begin to start this process in their local communities. So it's wonderful to have him there. I know you work with him too.
I did not work with him. I worked with one of his colleagues, Dr. Michael Menser, who's a mentor of mine.
The two of them are, they work very closely together. So,
But we worked with Josh when we got started. Yeah.
That's great. No, he's really very well known all over the United States. And you'll talk a little bit more about that, Richard.
Yes. And Val, I'm not sure when you'd like to do this, but the Josh's organization is the Participatory Budgeting Project in New York City, Brooklyn, New York, and they produced this wonderful 4-minute video that really explains. We could talk for half an hour and still not explain what this 4-minute video explains. So
you want to show it now?
Sure, let's do that.
Right, if you live in this community and you pay taxes, come out and vote, decide how your tax dollars get spent.
Participatory budgeting gives people real power over real money to make the decisions that affect their lives. It's a democratic process in which ordinary community members directly decide how to spend part of the public budget.
Oh, this is different because you're actually voting for where the money is going to be spent instead of allowing them to decide where to spend the money.
Who knows better about their community than the people that live in their community?
Not be afraid of the big words, participatory budgeting. It sounds boring, but it's the opposite of that.
So how does it work? First, people brainstorm ideas. They come together in meetings and assemblies and start to think of what kinds of projects they would like to see in their neighborhood.
We had to think big. We have $1 million that we could use, so we can fund parks, health issues, streets.
Volunteers work with experts to turn people's initial ideas into full project proposals.
We started with maybe about 40 projects, and so we had a series of budget delegate meetings, and we narrowed down the list into about 4 or 5 projects.
We met with the Parks Department and we talked about what we wanted to see change in some of the parks and how we were going to work with them.
What are the real needs of the community if you only have a certain amount of money? What is it that you can do that's going to benefit as many people as possible?
I'm dreaming of new benches, modern benches. Seniors have nowhere to go.
Displays at bus shelters throughout the district, and it will tell people when the next bus is due to arrive.
We're asking for a projector and 30 Mac laptops. State-of-the-art teen fitness center.
To put solar panels on a firehouse.
After volunteers share the top projects, the community gets ready to vote.
It's a way of validating every voice in our community and saying, you know what, whatever your position is, you live in our community, you have a right to decide. And that me as a representative and government should respond and should listen to that voice. Anybody could vote in this process, immigrants, whether you're documented or not, young people that normally don't get to vote.
Most people, they don't even know that 16-year-olds can come out here and vote today. Some of them are really surprised. They said, really? I said, yes. They have a voice.
The projects with the most votes get funded.
The Red Hook Library Community Garden, right here.
The projects are then implemented over the next few years. In the following year, the process starts again. People brainstorm new ideas, turn them into new projects, vote on them, and fund more improvements for their community. PB becomes part of the budget process. It becomes a new way of governing.
I think this is like the greatest wave of democracy coming into the United States. It started in Porto Alegre, Brazil in 1989.
From there, it spread all over Latin America to over 1,500 cities around the world. In Toronto, public housing tenants have decided how to spend millions of dollars on improvements to their buildings. City council members in Chicago, New York, and other cities have engaged thousands of residents in allocating discretionary funds. Entire cities have launched PB, such as in Vallejo, California, for funds from a sales tax, and in Boston for youth funds. Even schools and universities have used PB.
This was a great opportunity for you to be a part of government and better the city you live in. Who wouldn't want to take advantage of that?
You're creating a more educated platform of voters overall. So I think this can only be good for the big project of democracy.
video is really fascinating, and just to see so many people participating in this process in a large city like New York City, and seeing young people also involved in that. I guess one question I have, is the recommendations that come out of the process. The elected officials have to abide by those recommendations, or do they have any power to change their decision?
Well, the way we've done it here in Hartford, and I think probably everywhere, is that the city government is a partner in the project right from the beginning. So technically, I believe that they don't have to do what people vote to do. But if they choose to go in a different direction, so much credibility would be lost. That would really damage the process. So it's not likely to happen. And that's part of the whole process, is that the actual projects are really important and they're great, but it's the community engagement process that happens to get to the projects that is equally important. And bringing people together, building relationships among individuals, but also among organizational partners like the city, and in the case of Hartford, the library, and a couple of other partners. So a bond and trust is built. So it's not very likely that will happen.
And one way that we've identified that can help mitigate things like that, so you don't want to get to the end of the process where we have now a project description and it's ready for voting, and there's something in that that's impossible for the city government to do. So when what we call action teams, groups of volunteers, are turning the ideas into project proposals, we have them work with city staff in the same arena. So if it's a public works project, then we want them to meet with some public works staff and say, do you see any issues here? How would it be improved? So it doesn't prevent that from happening, but I think it makes it easier for the city government to accept the decisions.
Yeah, I think that's consistent across PD processes, that the agencies that are associated with the different types of projects, whether they're parks or transportation, that they provide technical assistance in some form to the groups.
Absolutely. And so in a way the process allows for removing any impediments later on, or making it more likely that it will go through. It has to be finally approved by the council, the city council.
No.
It automatically goes straight to the treasurer or
the council adopted in its capital improvement plan an amount of money. The first allocation was $1 million, or was it a little more than $1.25 million? And they understood the process and how it was going to work. So that was in the adopted budget. So then when the ideas turn into projects and they get voted on, then we turn to the city to implement the projects. I won't say it's been a smooth path all the way, but there's no further decision-making required.
After that, exactly. So how did this happen in Hartford? Can you talk about that? What did it take to get it started here?
Took Richard.
You will make it happen.
Yeah, right. No, that's not true. But what is true is that in, I believe it was 2012, I went to a conference in Seattle, the NCDD, National Conference on Dialogue and Deliberation. And I had never heard of participatory budgeting, but somebody from Chicago did a presentation on it, and then somebody also from New Hampshire. There were two presentations in the same. And I just thought it was the greatest thing I ever heard of. So I talked with them some more, and then came back to Hartford and started talking with people here. Linda and I were already involved in something that we call People's Budget, which has some similarities to participatory budgeting, but is significantly different. But we were working the Hartford Public Library, the city, Metro Hartford Alliance, Leadership Greater Hartford, and Hartford 2000s. We're already working on People's Budget for over 10 years. So I said to this partnership, hey, why don't we try participatory budgeting? And it took a little while, but they were interested. And we talked with Josh Werner from Participatory Budgeting Project in New York. He came to Hartford for a day and met with us, met with the mayor, met with the city council or some members, yeah. And we were off and running. Do you want to add anything to that? I mean, that's basically how it started.
Yeah, it is. And then from there, we convened a whole lot of volunteers to plan to kind of design what it would look like here, based on the model that we had, but some slight tweaks. So we had to design the process and how it was going to be implemented. And I think we were fortunate in that the mayor at the time was a big champion of it. And that's who recommended potatoes. Yep. And he convinced the council to allocate a pretty significant amount of money, $1.25 million.
So you do, in some way, you do need a champion, someone from the government that says, you know. In the case of New York, Christine, it's the city council members.
Right, yeah, at the council level, I think Melissa Viverito has been a large sort of citywide champion, but I think has brought other council members into the fold, and other council members have gotten really excited and cared for the church.
Exactly. Yeah, in New York, I assume that when they saw that this was working in some of the districts, some of the other councils, they said, well, I want to do it. Yeah. So I think that's part of the process of buying into this participatory innovation.
Yes, and the Participatory Budgeting Project has done some studies and produced a report or two that indicate that elected officials who become involved and become champions of participatory budgeting have done very well. It has helped them in their re-election process.
It makes sense. Yeah. It makes sense, yeah, absolutely. That's great. So in the video we saw a little bit about the process. You know, they did a good job, I think, in putting it into a format. But in terms of Hartford, can you talk a little more about what goes into the process? You know, how does it start? And you've already mentioned some of it, but just a little bit more in depth.
Well, it starts with bringing a lot of people from the community together from different areas, and we usually have had 3 to 4 big meetings, which are called assemblies in other, like in New York. And the purpose of those meetings are to brainstorm. So people in small groups and then as bigger groups brainstorm what are the issues in Hartford. Steve mentioned in Brazil, they had very definite issues that led to the program being created. But here, there are a variety of issues in a variety of arenas that people want to talk about. And sometimes we talk about problems, but it's not really a problem, it's an issue.
Yes.
So an issue is, you know, like there aren't enough benches for the senior citizens, or there's no community garden in my neighborhood. So they brainstorm the issues, and then they brainstorm ideas for addressing those issues. So the solutions might be, oh, we'll create a park here for the seniors and put benches in there. And we encourage people to, when they come up with ideas, to come up with locations as well. That doesn't always work in the very beginning. You sometimes reach that recommendation later on. So they brainstorm ideas. Those ideas are kind of grouped together in areas like maybe parks, public works, lighting, economic development. And then we form, or volunteers form action teams. So those are people who are willing to put even more effort into this than just appearing at the meeting and brainstorming, which is clearly very valid. But now we need some folks to do work. So they meet, I guess they meet once a week usually, maybe not that often, but they take their category of ideas and they combine like ideas. They look at ideas that might be a little difficult, like we want to do something in West Hartford. No, I'm sorry, this is for Hartford. So put that aside. Usually we try to share ideas that don't make the cut with people or groups that could do something about them. But generally speaking, what comes out of the action teams are project proposals. Okay, we're going to combine these, we're going to do this project, and now we have to design it. Where will it be? How much will it cost? Who does it benefit? That's kind of the primary important thing. And to some extent, what's the priority of this project compared to some others they may have in their group?
Well, and that was a really good summary, just a couple of things. At the very beginning of the process, we make a real effort, and this was done in New York, and I think in general, anywhere that's doing participatory budgeting, to bring in a real diversity of people. Because one of the keys to the success of PB is that it be driven by the community, and that it be inclusive, and especially that it include people who usually don't have a voice, people who are typically marginalized. So we made a real effort at the beginning to bring in a great diversity of people. And my own belief is the more diversity you have, the better the process works. Another thing we did fairly early on in the brainstorming sessions, which is near the beginning of the process, is before we gave everybody the opportunity to talk about concerns and then ideas, we talked about assets. We talked about what's good in Hartford, what's good in your neighborhood. And part of the thinking there is to establish and have everybody see that, in fact, there are lots of good things in the community. And that sets the whole thing in a more positive tone. And it prevents or mitigates at least the chance that it will turn into a gripe session. So that was an important decision that we made. And then another thing, this may have been mentioned in the video, but at the beginning, a steering committee is established. And on the steering committee also, you want to have a great diversity of people, but the steering committee writes what is often referred to as a rule book that sets out parameters. It, for instance, says what kinds of things are eligible for the projects. And that's really important. It will say things like, it's got to be a project in Hartford, not in West Hartford.
The capital probably usually.
Well, exactly. In the case of Hartford, and a lot of cities in which this is being done, it is capital money. That's the norm.
That's the norm, but
Yeah.
some other districts like Vallejo does things
Right.
differently and has more programmatic funds that come from staff members and things like that, or
Right.
educational programs. But in general, it's capital funds.
Yeah, but in our case, it is capital money from the capital budget, which means the projects have to be for physical improvements to city-owned property. It can't be to set up a new after-school program.
Or to improve your building.
Right, no, your own, right. But the rule book will set out all those parameters, and that's sort of the roadmap for the rest of the process. So.
And the action teams use that rule book to guide their process. And we get to the end of the process, which is those project proposals. They go on a ballot, which we saw in the video, and then people vote. Yeah. So you have to be a Hartford resident, 13 years of age or older to vote.
That's great.
You don't have to be a citizen or any of that. You just have to live here and be older than 13.
Wow.
So we did pretty well, encouraging people to vote.
And am I right, and I think this is before I sort of came on board, but that you also engaged people who are incarcerated?
Yes, we
or,
did.
Which I think that is really unique to the Hartford process.
Right.
That's
unique
sort of,
to Hartford.
yeah, really special.
That is, yeah. But the fact is, some of these inmates, when they're released, they don't go back to the Hartford communities. And it's good that they have participated in some way in the process.
And that was made possible by one of our volunteers and he was a staff person also for a while, but he was an outreach worker. And he knew people in Department of Corrections. So he hooked us up with the warden at the Hartford Correctional Center, which is where you wait if you're going to be on trial. It's not where you serve a long sentence or anything. We had, granted it was an opportunity to come out of your cell and come downstairs, but we had a lot of people guys who came down, they voted, they had their pamphlet that explained the projects, had that in advance, and then they could vote. And what their comments were generally was, well, I might be here, but my family is still at home in Hartford. And so they looked at projects that would help their families.
So that's another reason to have them engaged. That's right. So I hear that there's some great projects that came out of these, right? And I was wondering if you could talk about just a few examples, and I think we have some photos, right, that we can show, and then maybe when we see the photos, you can make some comments on it. Right?
Sure. Yes, we have, by the way, we didn't mention this, it may be obvious, but we decided to call participatory budgeting in Hartford Decides.
That's right. And I like that there's like a little dollar sign.
Yes, the S on the end is $.
Yeah, very creative.
But we have a website.
Spanish, it's Hartford Decide.
Hartford Decide, that's true.
There's no S.
Right, that's right, but the dollar is written to remind you, right? It's someone money, which is great.
We have a website, which is hartforddecides.org, and that's what we're going to look at now.
Excellent. So we'll look at some of the photos, and then we can comment on that.
We're going to see projects from 2016 and 2017, which are the 2 years that we actually went through the entire process.
Entire process, and later I'll ask you about challenges, so we'll talk about what happened this year.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start,
please.
We'll do it together. There were, from our brainstorming sessions, there were 150, 200 ideas. Which is typical in the participatory budgeting process. People generate a lot of project ideas. And then, as Linda said, action teams are formed. The ideas are put into themes, and action teams are formed to work on different themes. So, for instance, the Parks action team may have started with 30 project ideas. And their job over a period of weeks is to vet those project ideas and work with city staff to figure out, so what would it take really to make this happen, come up with a budget, at least a rough budget, do a little investigation to find out, it is a lot of work, to find out, is somebody else already doing this? That's something we actually insisted on in the process.
So somebody else, not necessarily the town or the city, but some organization.
Could be anybody. But we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We didn't want to have projects win and then find out that this is already in the works somewhere.
That makes sense.
So at the end of that process, I believe there were 22 projects that were actually on the ballot. And then I believe 5 projects won after the vote. And if you don't mind, Linda, maybe you can talk through the projects, because I think you've been more involved with them than I have.
So this is our big review.
We have a photo of that mural, right?
Yes.
Right.
So we can
Saw that before. Yeah. So Paint the City is a mural project, and the end product was one mural in every neighborhood in Hartford, 14 neighborhoods. So the challenge there was trying to find public property that the murals could be painted on. There was not a willingness for the fire station to have a big mural on it, but one of the first entities that said, yeah, we want a mural. So that was $122,000, a little more, $123,000 that was allocated for the murals. Then we had community gardens. People wanted more community gardens. We have some in Hartford. So the location was in the South Downtown neighborhood and at Hartford Public High School. So the group came up with 2 projects that they want to do. I should have said with the murals, we're probably half done with that project. There are probably 7 murals finished and several still underway. And we still do have 2 where we haven't found a location yet, but that's not
And
deter us.
the actual painting was done by artists?
Artists,
or,
yeah. It was the action team continued on its work after the voting, and they developed a pool of artists who said, yeah, I'm interested, and then they had to submit designs, and then we had a mini voting process on the designs. So for each of the neighborhoods, there were 2 or 3 different designs, and anybody could vote. In our, one of our values is to be bringing the community together. So we didn't have just the neighborhood vote, we had everybody vote, which raised some issues, but that's life, you know.
So implementation of this project is huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
They're not all like this.
Right.
But this is a good time maybe to mention that it's sometimes difficult for people to understand that when they're voting on next year's money.
Oh.
So, the vote takes place in March, and sometimes in April, people will say, so,
where's my garden?
yeah, why isn't it done? And the money isn't even available till the following fiscal year. And then sometimes it takes more than a year to implement the project. So that's why some of these projects from 2016 are still being implemented. So.
Are there only one commission money that has been used for the projects, or just strictly city revenue?
Well, it's city money, and initially it was city bonds that would generate the funds. But Hartford has a number of financial issues, so they're not currently selling any bonds. So they have to use capital funds that are kind of left over from other projects. So that's been a challenge. So the community gardens are, we haven't actually broken ground yet, so we're not going to grow anything this year. But they'll be installing the raised beds this fall and next year. Then people wanted security, and that was $60,000. Security cameras in senior centers. We have 2 senior centers. The people who used them were concerned. They didn't feel totally safe. They'd had a break-in or 2, not when people were there, but after hours. So that project is fully implemented. Public Works took that on, spent $160,000, and we had a party. It is, you don't think, but it will, yeah. And park lighting, which is budgeted at $408,000 from the first year. That's taken a lot longer than probably we expected. But the city hired a design firm, specializes in lighting, and they met with different neighborhoods surrounding the parks that we had identified. I think there were 5 of them: Colt, Elizabeth, Pope, and Keeney Woodland. And identified where the need for lighting was. And so now we're almost ready to begin the installation. There was another project approved in the first year that was, how would we describe it, a portable stage. Outdoor, there it is, performing arts dance pods. It never could really get off the ground. The action team they changed their mind after it was already approved, wanted to do it in a way different way. That wasn't working for the city, and eventually one of our councilwomen tried to intervene and find a solution, and she was not successful either. So that's kind of off the table. And that money got rolled into the following year, year 2017. Right.
Right, but it's a good example of how any community process is messy.
It is.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so this was a bump in the road, and these kind of things happen. Not everything works.
That's right.
But we and the action team, the implementation team, had to expend a lot of energy trying to make it work.
And we'll talk a little more about challenges, and I guess this is one of those. So
But again, I'd just like to mention that the projects are terrific and valuable, but wrapped up in every one of these projects is a whole community engagement process.
And you know, in a way, it also teaches people to understand how expensive keeping a city is.
Yes, that's true.
Because you'd be surprised at how many people complain that, you know, where's my tax money going? Well, it's expensive paying for police officers, paying for firemen, and for people, and taking care of lighting, taking care of, you know, potholes, and it just costs money. People don't realize that. So this is in a way to educate the citizens as well. And be supportive of other allocations that the city or town is doing, so that they understand, oh, they really are looking after ourselves. It's not like they're wasting money. This costs money to do.
Yeah, and it's also a way for city staff and city residents to interact together in a way that they don't typically have the chance to do. So for each of these projects, there were neighborhood residents working with city staff to figure out the initial budget, but then on implementation also.
But this is really exciting. And you started mentioning already one of the challenges, which is a project doesn't go through for some reason or another. What are some other challenges that you encountered?
I think I'm later on board here, but I think in general, as Richard has pointed out, just the timeline is not what people expect. Even the video mentions that it takes a couple to a few years for these projects to be implemented, and I think that is something that's challenging for stakeholders to really understand and appreciate the complex logistics that are involved and the bureaucratic processes to actually implement things. And I think, as you said, this is a real education for all of us who are outside of city government in that way. So I think that's probably a very consistent challenge across PD.
And from our work at Every Democracy of Dialogue to Change, we know that as people do this more and more, they become more confident, they get better at doing it, and they learn the ropes. And it's messy, as you said, Richard, you know, public participation is messy, which is why sometimes public officials are afraid of it.
Right.
But when they do see it and they're willing to invest time and be patient, they realize that this is something that really works.
Yeah. I think another challenge is that many people who get involved, they gain an appreciation for the good of the city.
Yeah.
There are some people, however, who are really focused on their projects. So, and if they don't win, they're not happy. A lot of people, if their project doesn't win, they say, well, that's okay for the greater good. You know, this entire process was good for the community. There are some good projects won. I'll try again next year. But not everybody feels that way. And so that is a challenge.
That is a challenge. And it comes with democracy. You know, one of the important values of democracy is the public good, the greater good. That, you know, and that you have the opportunity to participate. And if you don't get your outcome that you were looking for, the process is still there.
Right.
And you can still participate. Next time you will maybe get the chance. Compared to a place where you don't even have a voice.
Right.
Because the oligarch or, you know, whoever says this is what we're going to do, and the rest of you, none of what you like is going to get done. Yeah. So at least there's a sense of feeling that your voice is being heard in some way or another.
Another challenge was we had a change in elected officials at the end of the first year. And I think that concept of your voice being heard was not as paramount at first to them. It was more like, well, what projects are we funding and why are we doing this project? And that was difficult.
To educate the whole new administration.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Especially so early in the process.
Yeah.
But did that administration at least have the opportunity to engage with those who were part of the process to learn what their thoughts were on it? Because at least
to some extent.
To some extent.
Getting people together, getting elected officials together is not always
So,
easy.
yeah. So in a way, it does take really educating not only
Right.
the current administration, but people in general, and getting
Yeah.
them to participate in even, like a potential future candidate being part of the process and getting, saying, well, I want to do this if I become mayor someday or something like that.
Right.
So it is a learning process. Absolutely.
Well, and that for us was complicated by the fact that Hartford's budget crisis really came to the surface during the early days and weeks and months of the new administration. And that inevitably had an influence on the new administration's feeling about this process. And in fact, we haven't quite gotten there yet. For year 3 of Hartford Decides, in the middle of the year, the city government let us know that they were not going to be able to come through with the money that had been allocated. So we were sort of halfway through the process, and we had to basically put things on hold.
They obviously had some other priorities to pay some debts or whatever the last one was.
Right. And we understand that. For those who may be watching this video and may not be aware, I mean, the city of Hartford is in pretty desperate financial straits and was flirting with bankruptcy, and I guess bankruptcy is still a possibility. We understand we were disappointed, and in a sense, there's no better time to do a process like this than in a financial crisis. In fact, Vallejo.
That's the birth of it.
Yeah.
That's right.
right.
Do you want to say a few words about that?
They turned a challenge into an opportunity, right?
Right. In Vallejo, California.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I think they went bankrupt. I think the city went bankrupt, or was on the verge of bankruptcy. I'm not sure which. And I don't know how it happened, but they decided to start doing participatory budgeting for the entire city budget, not like in Hartford and New York and Chicago and
Yeah, they were
elsewhere.
the first citywide process, I think, in the U.S.
Right. Yeah. So really, it's a great time to do this process, but so far that's not the way things have evolved here in Hartford. So we're on hold with Hartford Decides, although we're looking into some other things which we can talk about at some point if you like.
Yeah, because I remember talking to you. You said that you still want to continue to educate people about PB and talk about maybe some of the work you're doing with universities. Maybe you mentioned something about that.
Well, first of all, of course, we're working on implementation of the projects for years 1 and 2, so that is still very much happening.
Absolutely.
Beyond that, we're talking, we're exploring a few other related things that I think have great promise, but all of them are in the very early stages, so it's too soon to say whether anything will actually happen. But there are some discussions going on with the university that has some interest in using PB. PB doesn't have to be a municipal process. It can be an organization or a university or whatever. So there's some discussion going on with the university. We're in the very, very early stages of talking with some high schools about doing PB in high schools. And that has been done in other places. In fact, there's a great video, 3 or 4 minutes on Josh Lerner's site, the Participatory Budgeting Project, about a project that was done in some high schools in Phoenix.
And students are part of that decision making?
Well, they run it.
They run it.
Yeah, they do the whole thing.
So
I think that's
about
really
civics education, right?
Yeah, and it can be done with a relatively small amount of money. For $10,000 or $20,000 total, they can do a lot. And also in the very early stages of exploring the possibility of doing a regional version of participatory budgeting.
Regional, like New England, or?
Well, regional in Hartford.
Greater Hartford.
Yeah. Which I think has great potential, but it's very early, so much remains to be seen. So even if we're stuck with our process, with Hartford Decides process because of the financial condition of the city, there are still other really great things that can be done.
Absolutely.
Should probably mention one other challenge, because it's been on our plate for the whole time we've been in this, and that is involving the Latino community. There are people who are Latinos who are involved, but the community as a whole is not very well involved, and so that's always a goal. We have not been as successful as we have been.
And you know, Linda, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the Civic Health Project published, as you know, the 2016, 2011 and 2016 Civic Health Index report. One of the findings is that the Latino community is not as involved in voting, for example, and in some other areas of civic participation. They're involved in church-related events and school events, now more so because of the PLTI, Parent Leadership Training Institute, and Connecticut Parent Power, for example, educating parents and building leadership for them. So they're more involved, and a lot of them are Latino parents, so they're more involved in education and in faith-based activities, but not in these kinds of processes, not serving in commissions and boards as much as other groups. So that is a challenge, I agree, and it's just trying to find a way how to reach out to them. So we're getting close to the end, but before that, and you know, one reason why we invited you to speak to us here today is because this is part of the Civic Ambassadors effort, and Richard, the Civic Ambassador, and one of the things we want is for other Civic Ambassadors to learn how this process works in Hartford, and hopefully get some of them interested in taking the idea to their town or city, talking to other community residents, other peers, and public officials, and maybe see if this is something that could be replicated in other cities or towns in Connecticut. So we're going to be posting this video on YouTube, and at the summit, the Civic Ambassador Summit on December 1st, 2018, we're going to have, hopefully we'll have a little video, and one of you could maybe talk a little bit to the entire assembly of Civic Ambassadors about this process, and we'll have the video also that they can watch. Because we want people to learn about this process as something that they can actually engage with their fellow residents. So what advice would you give them? Each one of you, maybe one advice, one piece of advice.
I would just embrace a spirit of fun and community. And I think that one of the threads that I see through this, along with all of the challenges and complexities, is that there's something very celebratory of community members, of places and spaces that come through participatory budgeting, and the opportunity for contact that a lot of communities just need more of. And I think that that's just such a wonderful, positive, fun, and enjoyable part of the process.
That's right, and that idea of building community is building social cohesion and social capital. And there's studies that show that communities that have strong social bonding and cohesion have a higher sense of pride in their community. Public officials are held accountable more, and they're willing to work with their residents or constituents. And overall, it builds opportunity and builds leadership and strengthens the community. So that's part of the civic health. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Linda?
Yeah, I guess I would say that the focus should not be on projects, but rather how to involve people together. Projects come later, and a sense of, and maybe I'm saying the same thing you are, but I mean, we went to places that I don't normally go to, you know, like a black church on Sunday. So we went there, we meet all different people. Well, it turned out we knew a lot of other people there, but you know, it's a different location, and it was their place, not our place, and the jail, and that sort of thing. But kind of describe it as a way for us all to come together.
Right, and you know, I'm glad you mentioned that, Linda, because Robert Putnam, who wrote Rolling Along, talked about social capital, but he also talked about bridging capital. You know, people tend to work on themselves, and that's fine, but you also want to reach out to those who are not like you, who are from another part of the city or town, and that's where you get even a better sense of community. So, Richard? advice to me.
My advice to you, and to anybody, is that you can do this.
Yes.
We started from nothing. We knew nothing, and a bunch of us got together and we made it happen. And it took some time. So my advice is you can do it. Be flexible, because be patient and flexible. Things are going to come up that you didn't expect. Again, it's typical of any community process. You think it's going to go that way, and it goes that way, and you just need to embrace that. I mean, that's part of it.
From the beginning comes in managing.
And ask for help.
Ask for help.
Yeah.
Talking about help, if for example, let's say I wanted to take this to Hamlet, to Kurt, our mayor, there was a great guy. Would you be able to go and talk to him, talk to the community group, and
sure.
So that's something that you can do as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or give an orientation.
Right. Yep. And other communities, like in Boston, you know, they may be doing something slightly different. I know they look a lot with youth, right?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so if that was a project, or New York City,
right.
They do everything.
Well, we have the best right here.
Right.
You know, so I'm proud of having you guys here. So.
And PVP, Josh Lerner's,
yes,
you know, looking, and even just using their videos and going to their website, sending links to people, I think that helped us a lot.
That's right.
And if I could throw in one more thing, start small. Just start with a pilot project.
That's right.
You don't have to take on the whole world in one fell swoop.
It's better with small baby steps. Right?
Yes.
Right. Because that way you learn, like this a little glitch, you can manage it better than 10 little glitches. They don't become that little after all. Right? So, any questions? We have Tere, who is a civic ambassador. I don't know if you have any questions, Tere. And you know, Tere's from Mexico, and you know, in Mexico they don't have, I don't think, any. I didn't see anything marked in the map there. And you know, obviously with Mexico, there's some issues related to government and corruption and all that. But you know, any questions you have, Tere?
No, I think that if people get more involved and then they listen to you talk, I'm enthusiastic about bringing it here because people will get enthusiastic and come with ideas. And I think, like you say, start small, and then people will start talking to other people, and if they are hurt, you say, go talk to Kurt, and then if people come and say, you know, they're going to really listen to us, and there are issues that can be solved.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people that also are into environmental things, like I was thinking, you put the lightning, is that for solar power or something, because it saves money. I went to Massachusetts the other day, and they had the whole panel for the lights on the freeway. And I said, well, I think this is the thing to go because I don't know if the budgeting will allow you to do those things with the lights. Like I saw single signs that they had the panel, so it can be self-sufficient to that. So I'm aware of that, and I think that would be also a nice thing to do. But along, you're doing a nice thing, but also help the environment.
Right.
So
And you know, not to mention that the parking, those parking things, what are they called?
Where you
Where you pay?
the kiosks?
Yeah, the kiosks. They have now.
Oh, solar.
You know, and I think so. That might be a project in the future. So someone might say, let's put some solar panels at school, or that would be the kind of project that you would support.
Well, it could be.
If the money,
If the voters vote on it.
That's right.
I mean, I think that's what's exciting is to provide the opportunity for community members to innovate and think about what their values are. And I was thinking about one of the assemblies, we don't call them assemblies here, one of the assemblies I came to in Hartford before I got involved with you as a group formally, and I was sitting next to a woman who was there to share her ideas, and she leaned over and spoke to me, first in Spanish, which I don't speak, but then she translated, which was very kind of her, and said, just how wonderful it was to be there because she knows what's best for her community and she doesn't trust it to the politicians to make that decision because they're not there in her neighborhood every day the way that she is, and that she has the insights and her community members have the insights that we need and that the city needs. And so that to me is sort of where we see what values are important. If it's the environment, if it's health, if it's food systems, how we understand and read what community members are saying are the most important issues or values in the community.
And one question that I forgot to ask is, how is Hartford Decides funded? Or because I know that some other projects somehow manage to get the city or town, the city, to take it on and pay expenses for running it, but Hartford Decides is all grant money, right?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because there's two kinds of money here. One is the project money, that's the capital funding from the city, but that can't be used for the operations. And as you can imagine, we've talked about this whole process. There's some work involved, and
it's mostly volunteer work, but
mostly volunteer.
Also needs people to sort of keep it.
Right. So we had to raise money from foundations to cover that. So in different cities it happens in different ways, but that's the way it happens.
And I asked that question because there is something called the Connecticut Founders Collaborative for Civic Engagement, and they are engaged in conversations about what are the kinds of civic engagement ideas and projects and processes that community foundations especially support. And this sounds to me like something that they might want to take a look at. So we're hoping to invite some of the members of the collaborative to attend the summit on December 1st, and we'll have Hartford Decide show the video and talk a little. Hopefully they'll say, "Oh, that's it. That's a good idea."
I have some money for it.
Because it's about putting the money. If it's about civic engagement, also being willing to put some money.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I think Val should speak for us.
I think so too.
By the way, we're part of a steering committee that right now is about a dozen people, I believe.
Yes.
So I just wanted to mention that we're not the whole show here.
It's a lot of people that are part of it. That's right. Absolutely. Sandy, I don't know if you have any questions. Okay. So let me just thank all of you again. Thank you so much. You're all very busy people. I know that, and very committed. And you sharing this information with us is so valuable. I hope the city ambassadors who are watching will say, "I want to learn more," because it will take learning more. If they have questions, they can certainly write to you, and we'll be sending information about that. And they can attend the summit, the City Ambassador Summit, where you'll be there, and they'll have a chance to learn more, and hopefully take some of these back to their cities or towns and see what happens with it. So I want to thank you for
Very well.
Thank you, everybody.